it may help to have a little context to know where we are in the story this morning. You'll recall that Jesus came to be baptized by John the Baptist. He went down into the water. He was baptized. As he was coming up out of the river, the voice of God came to him saying, I have noticed you. You are the one who has a job to do. I love you. I care for you. You can do this job. That's my modern way of putting it, what it means to have the voice of God come to you suddenly out of nowhere. So Jesus is then driven off into the wilderness. We usually imagine that he does this for some deep spiritual, esoteric reason. I'm not sure that's why he would have done it. I think it's just as likely that he has gone out into the wilderness to be alone for long enough to figure out how he's going to do what it is that God has told him he is supposed to do. He's poor. He has no education. He's the son of a carpenter. And he's been told to start a movement to proclaim the message of God to the world. How in the world is he going to do it? I don't know about you. That's what I would be doing. I'd be thinking, I'm just one person. How am I ever going to manage to accomplish this? And it's in that moment that the devil comes to him. He's been out there for 40 days. He probably hasn't had a whole lot to eat. And so the devil comes to him and says, well, if you're hungry, turn this stone into a loaf of bread. You can do that. And it may seem as if that's a kind of Messiah-like thing. I mean, I can't imagine the devil coming to me and saying, turn stones into bread or turn stones into money or anything else. But it's a lot more human than you might suppose, I think, I want to suggest. Think about it. If Jesus can turn a stone into bread today, he can turn a stone into bread tomorrow and every day for the rest of his life. He will never be hungry. He'll never have to worry about where the next meal is going to come from. He'll have no concern about want for anything. How many of us wouldn't want that? I mean, it's bad enough that I have to figure out how to go to the grocery store once a week, let alone figure out what eggs cost. Surely, if you were offered the chance never to have to wonder about how you were going to get fed ever again for the rest of your life, that's a pretty good deal. So, then we move on. The devil offers Jesus all the kingdoms of the world, the control of everything and everyone in the world. Again, it sounds a little bit messianic, but think about this one too. If you controlled everything, every country in the world, there would be no more wars, because why would it ever be in your interest to start a war against yourself? At a more human and immediate level, if you controlled everyone and everything, you'd never have to worry about locking your door again. There would never be any worry about your own personal safety ever. How much more could you get done if you never had to worry about anything that might go wrong? Anything that might not work out your way? Much more human and much more realistic as far as something we might want. And then the devil takes him and sets him on the top of the temple. I don't know about you, but whenever I imagine this scene and many other scenes in the Bible, to be honest, I imagine the devil and Jesus and nothing else around them anywhere. No people. It's like a movie scene. But is that really the way it would have been? No, the temple was always crowded. There were always tons of people there. So if Jesus is going to throw himself off the top of the temple and be saved by angels, everybody's going to see it. And at that moment, he's got a whole lot of notoriety. He's the guy that jumped off the temple and didn't die. How much easier is it going to be to make your startup work if you're that guy? How much easier will it be to do anything you want to do if you have that kind of fame? How can you possibly fail when you have already managed to defy gravity? Surely people are, your angel investors are going to show up and give you their money. More than that, and at an even more deep psychological level, it gives you a kind of immortality. You'll always be known as the one who jumped off the temple and survived. Who wouldn't want to think that whatever they were doing would produce some legacy, that what we're doing in this world, in this life, matters enough that something of it will survive us. That is what the devil is offering Jesus, these very human things. Not necessarily anything that applies only to the Son of God, but applies to every one of us. And so it is, I think, a good thing that we're hearing these at the beginning of Lent, because they give us things to think about. There are two major points here. The first, and perhaps the more obvious one, is that temptations come to us in forms that ought to look pretty familiar to us. We do pretty well, I think, with the Gothic sins. Murdering and greed and lust and gluttony. We can see those sorts of things. We don't generally wake up in the morning and go out thinking, I'm going to be murderous today. If you do get up and think that, please don't tell me. But a whole bunch of us get up in the morning, in fact, almost all of us thinking, I got to go out and make a living so I can feed myself. I need to be able to have shelter. I need to be able to do something that gives my life meaning. These are the things we think about when we get up in the morning. And God knows that we need all those things, to coin a phrase. What the devil is offering Jesus are not those big Gothic sins. They are the everyday good things that we know, that God knows that we need, that nonetheless can sometimes get in the way. How often I began to say I there, Freudian slip. How often do we look at those things and let them get in the way of what it is God would have us do? How often is our anxiety about the concerns of this life a block to whatever it is God is intending for us to do? That's one thing to think about as we go through Lent. Yes, by all means, do not murder, do not steal, and those other things. Stop and think about all the other stuff too. God wants us to present the entirety of our life at the throne of heaven. That includes all the stuff that is good, all the stuff that we value, all the stuff that we need. Not because it'll be taken away from us, but because it can be recast. We can see it in new and different ways. That is the beauty of the time we have in Lent. That's one piece of it. But there's more to it than just that, I think. The second point is that line that kind of sticks with us, that's disturbing right there at the end. And the devil departed from him until an opportune time. We know in this story, Jesus is in a position of weakness. He's been out fasting for 40 days. He's confused. I'm sure he's hungry and thirsty and all those sorts of things. We can recognize that, and I think we can feel for him in that. We recognize how temptation comes to us in moments of weakness, at our lowest points. How am I going to get out of this problem? I'm going to rob a bank. That sort of thing. Thinking that can seem awfully logical to us in those moments. That's still in the Gothic category. I want to suggest to you that the temptation also comes to us at the high points. Remember, Jesus is off in the desert working out the fact that God has spoken to him directly. Has said, I have anointed you to go out and do this work. Imagine the temptation that comes at a time like that. If you want to put it in human terms, imagine whatever would be tempting to you. You won the lottery. You got a new job. You've been invited to move into a new house that you don't have to pay for. Whatever it is, whatever great opportunity comes to you personally, there's an awful lot of temptation to say, well, now I've got everything I need. Now I am invincible. Now I am invulnerable. How true is that ever really? Think about it for us collectively. Whenever the church has the same thing happen, a gift that we didn't expect falls into our lap, a new ministry arises, a new opportunity to work in the community somewhere comes up. How often do we use that to say, well, now we can take care of ourselves, we don't have to worry about anything? How many churches are there in the world who have so much endowment that they feel like they don't have to worry about paying for anything ever? They can live off their grandparents. That is the temptation that is insidious. because it feels like we're doing the right thing. We are being responsible with our possessions. We are doing the right thing with whatever has come to us in this world, in the worst case, because we earned it. Sometimes we fool ourselves to think that, dear friends, don't we? In reality, it is at those high points that the devil finds a way in. Make use of this. Take care of yourself. That also is worth thinking about as we go through Lent. Where are those high points in our lives? Where do we feel most secure? Where do we feel most competent? Where do we feel like we have the least to worry about? Where might the devil be poking a head under the tent, a nose at least under the tent in those places? It's worth thinking about. You note that when Jesus is tempted, he doesn't come back and say, I don't need any of that stuff. I don't need whatever you got. Whatever you got, just keep it. What he comes back with always is, you need to be in a right relationship with God. That, dear friends, is what we should be looking for in every corner of our lives. Not to say that there's nothing we don't need. Not to say that there's anything that we would turn down if it were offered to us. But always to have it in right relationship. Always to be looking for the way in which we are serving God in that thing, in that place, in that opportunity, in anything and everything, to be serving God. If we can do that, then we too can come back out of the wilderness just as Jesus does, ready to serve. Amen.